Hello, welcome to Blue Chip Academy, the Blueprint to Success interview series, providing unique blueprints, tactical knowledge, best practices to navigate the critical points in the football ecosystem so athletes and parents can prepare a plan to a career path that any athlete can bank on. Today's a special episode. We have Senior Associate Athletic Director of External Relations and Development at Morgan State, Lydell Sargeant, joining us today for the Blueprint to Success interview series. So welcome, Lydell Sargeant. Like we mentioned earlier, who's the Senior Associate Athletic Director of External Relations and Development at Morgan State University, also a former NFL player, four-year letterman at Penn State University, has raised over $400 million in gifts and athletic development since transitioning from the game, with stops at Marquette, UCLA as Senior Athletic Administrator. While starting quarterback at Penn State, this is a fun fact about him, he was also the presidential campaign staff assistant for Barack Obama. So we'd like to welcome to Blue Chip Academy, the Blueprint to Success series, Lydell Sargeant. What's up, man?
What's up, JK? What's up, JK? Thanks for having me on, man.
Awesome. Welcome, man. You know, we already talked about a little bit about your background and just moving into the recruiting process, and just you have a unique experience and perspective just through the whole process, right? From being an athletic administrator, multi-sport athlete coming out of high school, going through the recruiting process on both coasts, right? Starting off kind of in Pittsburgh and then like blowing up per se in California. I can't say blowing up because you played varsity sports in two sports in ninth grade. So, you know, you weren't under the radar. So going into this, what's the one piece of advice that you would give to anyone entering the sports business that they can bank on for success moving throughout the whole process?
You know, one of the things I'd say is information is key. Right. And I say it in that those who have been through the process have information that folks who haven't had, right, or who have never been through that process. And for me, that was my case. My parents were never in an athletic space per se. My dad came to the United States from Barbados when he was 13. And so there was never really a background in sports, you know, definitely not in college sports or anything like that. So I definitely say information, right? Learning how to train, learning why you're training, learning the keys to getting recruited and those things, right? And so I would say the power of information, like in any space, but especially in the recruiting space.
100%. So like, just to reiterate kind of what you said, going into the business, right? For any athlete, parent going through the recruiting process, transitioning out, kind of Lydell's thing is like one piece of advice that he would have is information is key. Understanding where you're going and like the decisions that you're making and what you're basing those decisions off of, right? Like that's a very important thing. So information is king when we move through this process. It's recruiting process, transition out of the game, going into your career field or whatever that is, picking majors in college, whatever those things are, information is key. Understand, we talk about evaluating schools throughout this process, and we're going to jump into the recruiting process, right? Lydell had a pretty interesting look at the recruiting process, playing at two different high schools and excelling at both, right? At elite level. So playing two varsity sports in ninth grade. We always talk about getting onto the recruiting scene, getting on there early. And for example, Lydell was a person that got on in baseball and basketball and ended up going to college in football. So can you talk to me a little bit about your recruiting process and how was your experience from ninth grade to 12th grade playing in California and Pennsylvania?
Yeah, well, you know, I'd say my recruiting process, and you talked about it, wasn't necessarily in football to begin with, right? Basketball was really where I got introduced to the recruiting process, the AAU circuit, right? Understanding and seeing, going to the nationals down in Florida and seeing, okay, there's 15 college coaches here. This is how you get in front of those guys, right? And so that's when I really started to understand recruiting, right? Seeing LeBron James in Cleveland in 8th grade, right? Seeing those things and saying, okay, well, now you got, you know, successfully coming and watching a 7th grader play. This is recruiting. And so for that, and then, you know, Terry Smith, he mentored us, mentored me, I should say, very much in Pittsburgh, being from Monroeville. And so he had already understood the process, right? You talked about it. We used to go to Duquesne, and I would tag along with you and assist in the ball, you know, the ball boy duties. And so the recruiting process for me, understanding what the recruiting process started early, and then in high school, you start to understand what the beast is, right? You start to understand, okay, well, there is more of a business side to this. There really is more of a structured side to recruiting that is something that you probably can't really understand, right? There's personnel within that college administration on that college team that is going through everybody's profile, talking to every high school coach, talking to every high school counselor. And so when you start to understand what that beast is, that's when it gets real. And that's right around 10th grade for me on the football side.
That's very interesting when you say that, because you talk about your experience starting, and the next question is, when did the process start getting serious? But you were kind of introduced into the elite basketball scene and baseball early, when you talk about the AAU travel circuit, and you were talking about like basketball being one of those sports where they recruit early. You kind of know, a 6'5" guy in 7th grade is going to be somebody. So you kind of saw elite sports, like the elite sports business first, before you kind of got into elite recruiting. You're like, okay, there's a business in this, and athletics in general. This is serious, blah, blah, blah. So when you just kind of transition over to football, is there any differences from like seeing the basketball AAU circuit, and then once you started to get recruited in 10th grade in football?
One thing I'd say is, because football is such a physical sport, you don't necessarily get that national spotlight until high school, right? So you're not really seeing Coach Franklin or Nick Saban going to a 6th grade or 7th grade to a football tournament. So in basketball, so for football, it's like, okay, now the recruiting of football has caught up to what I've seen in basketball, right? And so in football now, it's like, okay, now these coaches can tell physically how big these kids will get, right? And whether or not you can really play football, which is a physical game at the next level. And so, that was the difference in the football, is like, okay, now it's caught up. And then understanding, okay, well, now this is the same thing that we saw in basketball, but it's now in football.
Right. So just the same thing, like the parallel is understanding that it's a serious business. Because you said the next question is, how did multiple sports help you in the recruiting process from the evaluation standpoint, in terms of transitioning? Like, we've already established that you understood it was a business once you were starting to get recruited by football. But how did the multiple sports, was that something that coaches kind of lend well to you, or did you feel good about, getting recruited and maybe still having to play baseball or play basketball and things of that nature? Where did that fit in your recruiting process?
Well, for me, it was my ability to show that I had different skills than what was shown on the film in football, right? It's like, okay, this guy is really quick, but then when you see me play in basketball, it's like, oh, okay, this guy's a different level quick, right? Because you're so close to him, you can see the action. Where on the football field, it's like, these guys are fast. And so for me, being a quick guy, that's when you can really tell. And it's the recruiting period, right? What being in college football recruiting, what I know is like, that's the time when the coaches can go on the road. So if you're a basketball guy, right, there's going to be 4 or 5 football coaches in that arena to watch you play basketball.
Right.
And if you're a guy like me who can really ball, and like, that's some of the skills is your quickness, that's your opportunity to shine, right? I would say baseball is more or less on the skill trait. Okay. Right, then let's just say a trait, skills that transition over into the game.
Right. I think that's a real point that you pointed out. Like, even though basketball is kind of your intro into the sports business being real serious, and then it's also another evaluation point for college coaches to look at you and say like, oh, he's a baller, he moves like this. Because like, as a recruiter or just somebody who's evaluating, we always look at overall athleticism, right? And sometimes it's hard to tell in football if you're just faster than people or the competition that you're playing against. But when you get on the basketball court, you can see how people move, and there's certain movements that you just don't typically see. It's funny you mentioned that, because we had an episode, I don't know if it'll be before or after, with a coach, and he mentioned he got his offer from a basketball game. So those things, understanding the guys when you listen and playing multiple sports, is still a critical piece. There's a lot of value to that before you specialize, just different paths for different people. You mentioned earlier about, Terry Smith mentoring you when you were in Pittsburgh, and then when you transferred to California to Lompoc. How informed were you through the recruiting process? Like, when you were getting offers, like, take me through that. Just offer comes in, I'm researching the school, or is it just like, oh, I like that school, I got an offer? Like, just take me, how informed were you through the process?
Well, first things first, everybody, the great philosopher Mike Tyson says everybody has a plan until they get hit in the mouth, right? Meaning, what's going to happen until that first letter comes in the mail and says you've officially been offered a scholarship to play at this institution, right? For me, that was BYU.
Okay.
And I got that letter and I was like, we made it, right? Meaning, we ain't paying for college, which is a big thing, because for me, it was, that's the way, or we got to figure it out, right? And so that was when I was like, and then also that one was when I was like, okay, I got to take this serious, right? Because before it was like I was just showcasing my ability, and then it was like, okay, I got one scholarship, now I can get a bunch more, but I definitely need to elevate my game. And then I start to understand it's like, okay, I belong here. And there's always doubt in whether or not you belong until something happens, right? You go to nationals, you place in the top 3 in track, or you go and you start doing things that are comparative to people that are getting offers. And for me, that was whenever I got that first offer, it was like, okay, now I need to start to understand what the difference is, and how I need to evaluate this process.
Gotcha. You mentioned on a point where you said that's when you realized it was serious. Like, all right, the college game is in it, but you also had a recollection of how serious the game was playing AAU basketball. You're one of the people that I view going through the ecosystem and understanding from an elite training standpoint, like at a young age, training on the weekends, having that no off season type of approach to the game. So when you're mentioning that change click to it being serious, I always felt like you did approach the like sports as serious. Is that you're saying that you thought football was now serious as like the other sports that you were playing?
Correct. I mean, just like you said, Sunday morning, 7 a.m., I was in, Beaver Falls playing basketball, training for basketball. And that was 4th grade, 3rd grade, Brandon Foose Cheatham. So, the folks who know basketball in Pittsburgh know the name. And so that for me, when in regards to elite training, that was good. And I knew I was good, right? You got people giving my parents cards at in 5th grade saying, hey, I want to represent your kid when he goes to the pros, right? And those type of things. But I just didn't necessarily, nothing's on paper until it's written, right? And so people can say how good you are and how colleges want to come and get you. But whenever somebody says, hey, now we want to get you, now it's like, okay, now we can do it. But the training, in regards to the seriousness of training, that started, 10 years old, 9 years old.
So you're basically saying the seriousness of getting the offer was like, all right, business time. Now the business is here. It is on me. I'm not up next. It's go time.
It's go time, right?
Gotcha.
You finally got the job. All the other ones was interviewing, and then now they say you got the job. Okay, now it's time to show up.
Yep. Okay. Gotcha. That's good. So when you did finally decide your school, what did you base your decision on?
For me, it was academics, right? Because similar to college, the pros was something that I didn't necessarily see myself being when I was in high school.
Okay.
Right? Because that was the elite of the elite, right? And I understood myself to be elite, but there was still some doubt. And I feel like doubt is always good because it makes you train harder.
Gotcha.
Right? You need to be confident that you can do it, but also it's like, okay, the Hall of Famer has doubt until he becomes a Hall of Famer, right? The all pro person, they have confidence that they can do it, but until that person is called, that's it. And so
that's like right into the Mike Tyson quote, right? When he talks about walking to the ring and it's like, I'm afraid. And the closer I get to the ring, the more confident I get, the more confident I get. It's kind of what you're saying. It's like the further away it's it's like, all right, what's up? And like the closer you get, it's like, I'm more confident because your preparation starts to kick in.
Yep. No, exactly. And so, that's that was a big thing for me, was understanding, hey, and once I got to college, seeing all those guys for us our freshman year go to the league, and we were playing with them, right? We weren't playing underneath them, we were playing with them. So once you understand that, then you understand, hey, you can really get to the league. That's when the training really turns up.
Got you. Were you thinking about post-football career or being an athletic director when you were going through the recruiting process? You get all the pamphlets. It's like, oh, these are our programs. It's accounting, pre-med, this, that, and the third. Like, did you know what you wanted to do when you were picking your schools?
I did. Academics. That's what we were talking about. And I'm sorry we got off track because we got excited about sports, right? But academics was my first thing for school,
Okay.
because I had that doubt. I didn't want to put all my money in the basket of going into the NFL because that's a risky basket, right? And so for me, what I did know is that if I go to school and I go and get this, I wanted to do pre-med, I wanted to be a dentist. If I would go and do pre-med, I know that's guaranteed, right? And so I do know and so that's why there were, less ordinary schools like the University of North Carolina that was in my top 5 because they had such a top-notch dental school that was so world-renowned.
Mm-hmm.
And so academics was very much at the top of my list in regards to picking schools. And so, whenever I got into school, understanding now it's how do you balance elite athletics with really wanting to be elite on the academic side.
Right. So being an athletic administrator, was that something that you wanted to do specifically, or were you kind of still focused on looking at the dentistry route?
Yeah, I had no clue about athletic administration.
You had no clue.
Right?
You just know you wanted to use football as a catalyst and leverage the education that you would get out of the experience.
I knew I was going to college, right? And what we like to say in regards to just analogies was that somebody was giving me a $200,000 bag.
Right.
What was I going to do with that bag? Okay, they were going to give me that education. Okay, so what does that mean? How can I flip this education and make $100,000 a year, $300,000 a year, $65,000 a year, right? And so just going through that process, that was very, very important to me. I had no clue about athletic administration besides being an athletic director. They ran all of athletics. Right. No clue about what that meant.
That's an important piece that you're just picking up on. Is like going in through it. It's like, I want to leverage this opportunity. Like you said, you already equated to money coming in. I can't waste it, whether it's relationships, making $300,000, $100,000. But what you're essentially saying is that you're going to use college to create an ecosystem so you can have a successful professional career, whether it's football or not, right? Like that's kind of what we want to do. And that's what we want to go through the ecosystem, looking for those opportunities as we pick schools. Lydell just kind of giving those inside gems of really going there and how that mindset gets there. Because sometimes we talk to kids nowadays, it's like, think about, well, I can't even say talking to kids. Sometimes kids will say education, or I'm looking at the academics just as a flat, because they don't know what else they're looking at, right? And like, really, we could be honest, like they might not care. So like you're definitely somebody that went through that process. That makes sense, as we'll get onto the stories and how you took advantage of all those different opportunities at Penn State. You know what I mean? With like talking about leveraging everything outside of the field. So when get into that, what would be the worst part of the recruiting process for you?
Really having to show interest in the schools that you don't like. Right. It's like, okay, I've moved on to these top 5s, but there's still these, 10, 15 that are still knocking. And because they're coaches that's what they need to do. Right. And so, because we respect these people and these coaches as people, we go and we hear them out, and we go and we get out of class and we hear them out, and they come with their brochures and they're talking to our coach and they're saying, if this place doesn't work out, this place will work out. And so that's quite difficult because you're essentially telling the coach, thank you for coming, we're interested, but you're not really interested, right? And so that was the first time for me having to fabricate interest, right?
Gotcha. Yeah.
And be like, yeah, I'm interested, because what if that school doesn't work out? You got to have a plan B. And so that's probably the most difficult process. And then having to continue show how good you are to coaches who doubt you. And so that's probably the second part.
Oh, that's key. That's key, because I always tell people that the maturation process and the recruiting process speeds up, right? Like you have to deal with grown men. You're evaluating schools. You have to be selfish, because you're looking for what you want. So it's like, I don't want to tell this guy, no, he's giving me an opportunity, but at the same time, I don't know if that's best for me. So it does make you grow up or mature faster. That's awesome. What was the best part of the recruiting process for you?
Talking to the coaches that you really liked. I was like, man, when this head coach pulls up to Cabrillo High School in Lompoc, California, and you get to come and they're walking in with their school uniforms, right? Their school sweatsuits, and you go and people are like, okay, and okay, these fruits are coming to fruition, right? Okay, like this is the stuff that you actually see in the movies. This is the blue chip movie, right? And so until it happens to you, it's all in a movie. And so until those things happen, and it's like, okay, now, okay, this coach is coming in, this coach is waiting outside. Okay? Until those things happen, I think for me that's enjoyable because you put so many hours into getting to this, so many Sunday mornings into getting to this, and so that's part of the process that you dream of watching all the movies and that.
Okay, cool. So just the overall experience of the recruiting, like being courted pretty much. Like that's the last time it kind of happens in sports, to be honest. Like that's like the first and last, right?
And in high school, nobody else is getting courted.
Right.
There's nobody else in that high school that's getting courted. There's not people walking through that door to say, "Hey, let me talk to this 16-year-old." Right?
That is so true.
So it's the counselors, the principals, everybody in that building knows that these coaches are in the building, and so that's that feels good.
That many fame, that's love, man. That's great. That's the recruiting process. A lot of these guys go through it now. It's like when we were going through, like you said, we were feeling it just from our school. Like now this stuff is coming on. Guys got Twitter, they got 50,000 followers, and the same type of excitement is, magnified times 100.
Dangerous levels.
Oh, dangerous levels. So it's crazy that we're going to transition a little bit. We're still talking about recruiting, but from the administrators and athletic department standpoint, right? So we typically talk to recruiting coordinators, myself, coaches, people that are sometimes closer to the game. So it's really cool to hear from an athletic administrator viewpoint on, some of the current recruiting matters and what's happening in college sports. So what is your view on the current, talent acquisition recruiting process from an athletic department standpoint? Like how the game is shifting in today's age?
It's shifting. It's truly a dynamic space right now. It's an exciting space because these young men and women are getting the attention that they deserve because they're driving the product, right? College athletics is a young men and women business, right? There's these young men and women, they come to these institutions and they work very hard for these institutions, and they come and they get their degrees. And so for them to be able to take advantage of this process and see how much it's expand in regards to their rights and how much they can take advantage of the system, it's exciting. And so it's very much a dynamic and a fluid environment, right? The NCAA is constantly evolving in regards to their procedures and protocols. And so it's something that folks don't know what the future is, but and I know as being elite recruits, this type of recruiting is something that has happened for a long time in regards to the attention on high level athletes, right? And so it's an exciting time and something that I'm very, very, very excited that the student athletes get to take advantage of.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's an awesome answer right there. So like in the development area, right? So it's like we don't typically get to hear, or I don't even know if some people understand exactly sometimes how the money flows. They say, oh, the players, are got NIL opportunities. So being the ace, kind of the chief person bringing in money, raising over $400 million in athletic gifts, since you started in athletic development, where have you seen, like in a new age of NIL, anything operationally with the athletic departments and fundraising efforts? Have you seen, that sector change a little bit? Because like you're at the top where decisions are made, right? You're at the level where you guys are hiring the head coaches that everyone else is talking about, and a lot of times people don't really get to hear from you guys about how you view the fundraising efforts and the shifts and where the money's coming from.
Right, right. Well, one, fundraising is the driver of major college athletics, right? A lot of the salaries that you're seeing from these head coaches is all private donations, especially from these coaches that are at state institutions, right? Public state institutions. And so a lot of this, the money that's driving it outside of, the revenue that's coming in via your multimedia rights and TV deals, a lot of stuff that's driving the salaries and all that is private donations. Pretty much 100% that's driving these large facilities and capital projects is all philanthropic. It's all donations, right? And so major college athletics is a philanthropic culture, philanthropic world now, right? Because you have folks that are have done well successfully themselves, and they want to, just like they do in other areas of the campus, they see athletics as an area that if they put their money into, it will benefit the overall institution. And so you're finding folks that just as though they would for the medical school, they're saying, okay, I'm going to give this to the medical school, and I'll also give some to athletics, because athletics is so valuable to the overall institution. And so fundraising is extremely dynamic. If you're starting to look at how different institutions or outside entities are forming to drive the NIL space, right? You look at West Virginia and your old colleague, Oliver Luck, and them doing that at West Virginia, building out that group licensing and the structure of how they want to do NIL deals, the way Georgia does it, the way, Miami and Florida has set this up, USC, Ohio State. You're seeing a lot of these outside entities because we as institutions can't have any involvement in the NIL process, right? And so you're seeing a lot of entities that are connected to the institutions, but do not work for the institutions because they just want to support philanthropically, get into that space.
Got you. That's a very good answer. Like when you talk about like fundraising and college sports kind of being driven by those donations and revenue from the sports and those different things. And you got the transfer portal that kind of fits in now, right? Where you got these outside entities and now players can transition and change schools, and that has changed the landscape, especially with NIL opportunities floating around when donors and people that want to be philanthropic want to, give those business opportunities, whether it's here or there, with students that may be in the transfer portal. Is that something that's come up in the administration ranks with, dealing in the fundraising things, how, the people that traditionally might have fundraised to the university maybe want to jump into those different third party sectors and try to help out in that way?
Yeah, I think, if it's not, then you're not trying to look at the big picture, right? Meaning, things that may come up in the future. Are you prepared for this? Right. And so understanding, okay, you may have some folks that have been all philanthropic in-house that may want to split and go some NIL, some philanthropic. And these are things that you can't drive, right? We don't drive the philanthropic dollars. We just connect these particular folks, our constituents, to the institution. And so you're definitely seeing that in the space. And folks are very much taking that into consideration. But they're all still the same people. The folks who want to philanthropically support the program are the same ones that want to support the student athletes, right? And so you're dealing in the same space. But you as a department can't be involved on the NILs process.
Got you. So you understand how the stuff flows, but you guys kind of, keep back and make sure things flow the right way. So we typically talk, like, again, with coaches coming up and they, looking for that next job, that next opportunity. What's something an upcoming coach could do to stand out to an athletic administrator? A lot of times they don't really know, what it is that they're being evaluated on. To move up or whatever the case may be, moving to a new school. College coaches just move all around, and you get in those ecosystems with athletic administrators and you guys call the shots. What sticks out to you with coaches?
Ones who win, right? It's like if you reverse it on the recruiting side, it's like what sticks out to you as an athlete, and the coach is going to say a 4-3 guy, right? The coaches who win, who produce elite players. Right, you take our guy B. Marion. He's producing a Balentikov. Right, he went through the offensive coordinator ranks to develop an offensive system, but he's winning. Right, Elijah Robinson, he's winning. Right, these guys are winning, and so winning the cream of the crop will always rise. Right, and so if you develop whatever room you got. And you make sure even if you are on a losing team, there are guys on losing teams that still go first round, right? And that's because of somebody that's in that room is developing them, right? And so I wouldn't necessarily say winning on the win-loss record. How are you developing the kids? How are you recruiting? If you're a top-notch recruiter and you're a top-notch developer, you're going to get found regardless because the kids will speak for you.
That's a great answer. I mean, it's like a productivity thing, right? It's like if you're getting players, you're producing, you're taking them from point A to Z in their career, you're showing development, talent, all those different things that you named, that can make you stick out from athletic administrators that are kind of looking for that next hire. So you touched on some traits and strong skills that they can have. Are there anything else, any traits that they should highlight coming into, say I'm a new coach and I come into, UCLA when you're there? Like what's a trait or strong skill outside of winning, right, that they can highlight, or like a tactical insight that they can move around the ecosystem within the football building or athletic or college campus?
And when we were younger, we called it training. I'd say now in older age, right, it's preparation, right? How prepared are they to get this job and to take it and to succeed? And so a lot of times you get folks who are going to come into a space and think they can figure it out in that space. And the things start hitting them really fast. The Mike Tyson quote, right? That's why I say he's one of the greatest philosophers, because you got to plan until you get hit in the mouth. And that hit in the mouth is that first day, right? And so you need to really be prepared for whatever structures you want for it to look like, what you want your room to look like if you're a position coach, or if you're a head coach, what you want every single department within your program to look like, right? That preparation, because if it doesn't happen tomorrow, if you're good, it will happen at some point. And so just to be prepared, the more prepared you are, the less surprised you'll be. And so I'd say that to all the coaches.
Most definitely. So coming in prepared, like the traits is being prepared, having a blueprint ready to go, and just being confident about your business, knowing that you have a plan, right? Like that is a major piece of this thing, guys. Today's episode is brought to you by LIG Sports Group, our specialty sourcing service for football and athletic departments and sports organizations. To maintain a top performing program, specialties positions within sports organizations must be sourced based on the best available talent in the country. LIG's systematic approach, intimate knowledge of the football industry, and extensive networks enables us to deliver dynamic candidates for critical roles. The football ecosystem and sports business is a fast-paced organization and movements. And at the end of the day, you want to be prepared and proactive with your talent acquisition to have the best people to fulfill winning programs and sustain success. So we're going to bring Lydell back in here. So we're going to touch on the transition, the critical insights and specific knowledge that you held throughout the transition, right? So how was your transition from the game from you? How was the transition for the game from you?
It was like being dropped in the middle of the desert. Right? I mean, it's probably the scariest space you will be if you're a professional, if you're playing pro, is specifically that transition, right, JK? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that transition from a pro. Well, I'm
sorry, but like, not to interrupt, but it's from the pro, but just from the game. When the game was like from some people, it's from from the pros, but yeah, you're leaving the field.
Okay. I'm gonna go on both, right? I'm gonna go on pros and college, because I understand college from being an administrator, but from the pros, it gets real tricky, because one, you got to figure out whether or not you want to stay in that city or not. Right? And so it's like, for me, I'm in Buffalo. It's like, okay, well, do you want to be in Buffalo? If no one picks you up this winter, do you want to be in Buffalo? Right? And so that's when the transition starts immediately, right? Because you need to start transitioning gas bills, right? You need to start transitioning your insurance, a lot of things, right? And those are all things that you also haven't done before, because whenever you became a pro, an agent handled that, right? And so you're really just thrown in the desert, right? Because there really is no advice that anybody can give you besides wait and see if you find an oasis. Right? Sit by that phone and wait and see if someone calls you. And so, we talk about it all the time, but it's like, that's probably the most anxiety period of my entire life. I'm just sitting by the phone every minute. It could be I would go nuts nowadays with all these spam callers. But it's a very, very anxious time. It's a time where it's a very uncertain time. Right. But I think it's always important to lean on what your base is. And so for me, the base was, I have a degree. Okay. My faith, right. That I didn't do everything so ignorantly that I don't have any money. And so those were my bases, that I can pay my bills, right? I got my degree, and with God, anything can happen. And so really, when you're that only person in the desert waiting for an oasis because you haven't hung them up yet, right? And that may be the same thing for somebody in college that may still want to play. But if you don't play and you're in college, I'll transition now to college. If you don't play and you're in college, it's the same thing, because you have all your bills in your college apartment, and then you got to move back home, right? You got to figure out, okay, do I just go straight to my internship and my job, or do I go back home to that room that still has my high school posters in it? Right. And so I think you're very much in that same desert. I think being a pro, there's a lot, you're dealing with a lot more things, a lot more responsibilities than the average, 20-year-old, 30-year-old. But that's definitely something that you just need to lean on what your base is.
Absolutely. That's a great answer. And you touched on it. And then the chronological order that you went is kind of different than most people, right? Because you said when you finish football, you transition, then you talk about finishing college. Can you talk about like when you finished in the NFL, how you went back and got into athletic administration to finish your degree? And then from there, it was kind of like separate, where you were kind of NFL, like back to college, and then into the workforce. Because it's like, that's typically, for some guys, that's not the route, right? Because you go back and get their papers.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the most difficult process that I have ever been in, besides my best friend passing when I was in college, right? And I say that in that we talked about how pumped everybody was in your town when those college coaches came in town, right? Well, think about it on the reverse side, when everything's done and you're going back to that same town where everybody pumped you up, and now you're a regular cat, right? You're a regular dude. And so for me, that was a very, very that was a very, if you were to say, ego and confidence hit. And so for me, I was like, I'm not showing my face. Right. And just to be truthful, that was just me, because I had always held myself to that elite standard, whether it was in athletics, academics, in my social aspect in school, and being, student government, all those. I was always felt like I was elite. And so for me, I was like, I need to, make money, because I'm not draining any of these savings that I work very hard to save. Right. And I'm going to trust in my financial advisor to continue to make sure that everything goes correct on that end. I continue to get some capital gains on that money, right? But for me, it was like, I need to make money, and so for that, making money and not showing my face was landscaping at 6 a.m. Right?
Because the next question, which was first transition jobs, like right.
So for me, I knew I need to make money because I don't want to drain money until I figure out what my plan is. Because you don't really truly have a plan until you are forced to have a plan, right? Meaning you may think you're going to go to this college, but something happens, you got to go to this college. You may think you're going to go to school to be a dentist, and then you realize, well, I'm not about to go take that dental exam after having 2 years in the league and making this money. I'm not going to go that way, because I don't think that's necessarily going to make me fulfilled as a person, right? And so for me, that transition was landscaping, right? And it ended up being one of my favorite jobs that I ever done. One, because it was just a labor job, and we're used to labor as athletes, right? Working out, doing things, putting the headphones in, and doing things you don't want to do, but know it's for the greater good. And so landscaping was my solemn for me to escape, and really there's a depression period that you have to make sure you get over. And I think people aren't explicit enough that it is a depression period. And I don't think there is any way to avoid this depression period. And so it is a depression period that a college athlete will go to whenever they go back home. There is a depression period that a professional athlete will go back home. Don't kid yourself and think that you're going to get over that hill in regards to just skipping that period. You have to deal with it and understand that you're going through it, and stick to your bases. And so for me, that was out there going landscaping while I figured out what degree I wanted to get next and what profession I wanted to do.
And let's jump on that, because when I say transition jobs, like, landscape is the first thing that you jumped into when you got out, like you said, you didn't want to spend money. You wanted to get into a routine and like the basis that you had. You had your pillars, you had your faith, you had your hard work, you had everything that you know, your degree and get your master's. You had all those things to lean on. What can we go into those next roles that you kind of went into from landscaping? Because you didn't just go from landscaping to, you know, ace development guy. Can we take us through that path a little bit? And did any of those connections from landscaping to working into the workforce or to your professional career now, did any college connections help you connect those dots from your recruiting process, I guess?
Well, first off, my college connections is the only reason that I'm in my current position.
Okay.
Right. Mm-hmm. And I say that it wasn't what I did in the league. It wasn't what I did with the presidential campaign. It was my college connections.
Gotcha.
Right. And I think that's very, very important. No matter what sector you go into, if it's finance, if it's anything, there will at some point be some connection to your university experience. Right. And so for me, that connection was Fran Ganner, who was the senior associate AD of football administration for Penn State. I interned for him to graduate. And so that's how that administration started. But from landscaping, I went and got my master's in sports management studies because I knew I wanted to be in sports and I wanted to be in a space that I could be a leader in that industry. And so I did my sports management studies, and my internship for my master's was different than my internship for my bachelor's. And that I did this internship with our agent, right, Eric Metz, who's one of the top agents in the NFL. I don't know how many first rounders, over 30 first rounders, one of the top guys. So I did my internship with Eric with his company LMM, and I really got to understand the sports agency industry. And so that really, really piqued my interest because I saw a gap in regards to folks who were helping with the transition. Right. I felt like folks in the agent industry weren't helping guys in the transition. I feel like as a former professional, the player drives their career, not the agent.
Gotcha.
I felt like the agent could be very valuable in the transition process. And so that was my next job after first official job after landscaping and getting my master's was working as a contract advisor, certified NFLPA certified contract advisor with Eastern Athletic Services as an agent.
Awesome. And so from there, that's when you jumped back into athletic administration. So
yeah, what I learned,
agent.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Gotcha. So if you guys listen to what he was saying, he comes out of his transition out of the game, gets in, has his foundations, right? His pillars, gets into landscaping, finds his solace there, gets into what he wants to do and keeps grinding, does the internship, gets into internship with an agent, gets a job with another agent, and then keeps going and building up those skills. And then the next opportunity gets into athletic administration. Did you getting into where we're at now, did you have a sense that it was going to be over before it was over? Because you say it was dropped into an oasis that kind of gives the sense of it was here today, gone tomorrow. But did you kind of know I think this is coming up, I need to transition my mental?
Well, I mean, it's hard, right? Because I'll give you a present day example, OBJ. As good of a player as you can be, it's all according to your situation, right? And so I say that in that, okay, you're done playing, but then you see guys that you're better with that are still playing, right? And then you go, well, I still may have a chance, right? Because if he's playing, then that means I can still play. And so for me, I don't think you can never necessarily be prepared. Even though for me, I had a knee injury and I knew, okay, well, I just need to, it's not going to work out for me because my skills, particularly quickness, was tied to that knee, right? But you also are like, okay, well, if the Ravens call and I go work out for them, right, I got to go do it because that means there's a possibility. So that hope that they always kind of dangle that carrot in the NFL. Because there are so many opportunities as the season progresses because of injuries and all those things. And so I never exactly knew, but I also understood that whatever happened, I needed to hit the ground running because I was not going back to my mama's house.
Got you. Yeah. Whatever it was, I'm gonna keep it pushing.
I gotta go immediately, and I need to go do it. And I ended up, going back to get my master's, just to, for a couple months to figure it out, right?
Mhm.
But that was something I knew I needed to hit the ground running and start and make some money so that I can still do what I needed to do.
Absolutely. That's a great answer, man. You talked about the pillars you leaned on, family, doing like working hard, your faith, all those different things. What attributes or traits from your playing days did you lean on from that transition from player on the field, right? You're going through the whole situation, agent, getting your master's, getting into athletic administration. Like,
Yeah.
was it your competitive nature? Where did you fill those knowledge gaps along the way?
Yeah.
Like, what attributes did you use?
Well, this is a fantastic question, JK, and I think this should be, people don't talk enough, and I talk about it every day with the kids, young men and women that I oversee as an administrator, is that they have so many transferable skills as athletes, right? And I'm not talking about how quick you are, how fast you are, how much you can run, but you understand preparation, you understand training, you understanding needing to do things more than everybody else around you, right? You understand what to do if they call it all out blitz. So there's so many transferable skills that if you aren't shy about it, and if you really just want to just accept that there are things in sports that translate to the real world that really make you successful, and one of those things for us, especially as professional athletes, is preparation, right? What do you need to know on first down, second down, third down? If they call the all out blitz, if they don't, if they call this zone blitz, right? All of those things are preparation. And so that's the biggest transferable skills, is that preparation to really be prepared for any scenario. And I think that's what student athletes have, even if you didn't go to pro, is that you have to very much be prepared for every scenario, and you have to work harder than your classmates who wake up and go to class at 12 and then get the chance to go out. And so that discipline and that hard work and preparation.
Our preparation piece is big because, like you said, when you get used to putting that formula in, like, all right, prepare to get this result. Once you realize what the result that you want, that you can put the thing in place. Like, that's like the how that I think a lot of people miss. But like when you said it, sometimes you don't be shy about it, right? Because like you take an ego hit, sometimes confidence coming out of the game, and guys are a little slow play jumping into next opportunities. But kind of what you're saying is like lean into it with confidence and try those new things and prepare. Don't be afraid to prepare, because sometimes people are afraid to prepare because they're afraid to fail. But that's some great insight there. So I know when I transitioned from the field from a player to like a recruiter, there was some just aspects of moving around, right, that were just hard. We talk about the transition being difficult. Transition process from player, right? Your mentality as a player, super competitive, to being a blue chip administrator. Like, can we talk about those difficulties from like, all right, I'm not a player anymore. I understand this is a critical view that I have, but now I'm an administrator. Like, I know I have this background, but I'm here now.
Yeah, I think, man, and we talk about what your mentality is very important. When we played in Pittsburgh, the only player I knew that could even come comparison to me when we were younger was you, right? But there was a mentality that nobody could be better than me, right? Mm-hmm. And that mentality is very important in regards to understanding that you are elite. And once you tap into that mentality that you'll do anything to be elite, right? You're willing to take any sacrifice. You're willing to work as hard as you can to be elite. I don't think that ever stops, right? And so for me, I wanted to be elite in everything that I do, right? And administration was a space that I know I could prepare harder. I can work harder. I can make sure I have knowledge to make me as successful as anybody that has ever done this before, right? And I think that's that same thing that I was thinking about every time I stepped on the field or the court whenever I was an athlete, was I'm elite and I can do things because I worked harder and I prepared harder for this moment.
Got you. So it's like building that confidence in your work ethic and your ability to work and outwork people and like prepare and execute your blueprint. That's all what you lean on. That's an important fact, man, for you guys, athletes making that transition, some that are going through high school to college, college to the pros. Don't lose that mentality and continue to put those building blocks and pillars, kind of like Lydell said, in place to every transition. So you're a blue chip prospect, blue chip college player, blue chip agent, blue chip administrator, and whatever the case may be. Like those different things that you can implement. And we'll obviously get into more technical things, but that's some pretty strong stuff there. So now current, Lydell is the senior associate AD of external relations and development at Morgan State. And he's done some pretty amazing things there. Obviously, we talked about his just career of raising $400 million, but he's done some really cool things, implementing the first wrestling program at HBCU and creating and launching a data analytics and sports data partnership with the NFL. So let's talk about those a little bit. Can you tell me about the significance of implementing the first wrestling program at HBCU and the benefits that might come from it?
Access, right? To spin it on in regards to recruiting, access, right? For us, it was, do you have access to 5-star basketball camp, right? Do you have access to how an elite track athlete is training? Do you have access to how the best defensive backs are backpedaling? Right now, there's so much access because of the internet, right? I translate that into my current job as wrestling. Now, our big thing is access, right? My big thing is access, right? Making sure that our young men and women have access to anything that they want, so then they can be great. And I think a lot of doors are shut on the access, and for that was wrestling at the HBCU level. There is no Division I HBCU wrestling program. And this past year, of the 10 NCAA champions, 5 of them were African American, right? So 5 of the 10 NCAA wrestling champions in all of Division I wrestling were African American, wow. Right? Our alma mater, Penn State, had 3 of them, right? But I say that in that there is a strong constituent group and demographics of elite wrestlers that may like the HBCU model and represent African Americans in the minority community, and they had no access or opportunities at HBCU institutions. And so that was the biggest thing for us to do in regards to that wrestling program.
That's powerful stuff right there, man. Just creating those different opportunities for just our athletes, for our parents, regardless of whatever HBCUs get to offer. But like implementing the first wrestling program, like you said, access is essential in all the things that we're kind of talking about. We just transition and talk about access. I think this next program is super cool. I mean, very essential, right? When you're talking about where the NFL is going, sports business, and we just talk about data analytics, and it just drives everything, right? Sometimes it just disqualifies some guys that want to get into different things in sports, that transition from a player and things like that. It's always like the jocks versus analytics, but it's a tool that we can always use. So like implementing this program, the data analytics program at Morgan, is very impressive. Can you take me through the thought process of creating a data analytics program with the NFL and Troy Vincent?
Yeah, one, data is the future. Well, it's the future of sports in every sector of the sport, right? Even down to sports medicine and sports health, right? Data, body sensors. When it comes to coaching and on the field, it's, we call it stats, right? Whenever we were looking at it back before the whole data became popular, but stats, right? How many times do they run this play on first down? How many times do they run this play on second down? Now it's just really in a big, easy formula that's easy for coaches to manipulate and really interpret, right? And so what we understood here at Morgan was that we have the only fintech center in HBCUs, and basically the job of the fintech center is to look at it was sponsored by Ripple, a company, a fintech company, and the job of our fintech center is to look at innovative ways of what the future would look like, and one of those is data. And the NFL, that was a sector that Troy wanted to do in regards to expanding NFL's reach with the HBCUs. And then for us to be able to integrate that into our school business and our fintech center and really build that out and build out a whole data analytics program, like I said, that's going to be the future of sports, but really just the future of everything that we do as people.
I think you're touching on, even with that, it goes along with the wrestling aspect. We're talking about access, right? We talk about guys getting into school or whatever the case may be. You provided another opportunity for students access to get into working in sports from an analytical standpoint, from whether it's analytics and you can have that opportunity. Because I know when I was at the XFL, we did a lot of our data through Syracuse and their data analytics program. And at the time, it was the only one. So I don't know how many of the numbers, but I know you guys are one of the few programs out there like that. So I can see the opportunities that are immense when you just talk about that gap knowledge, whether it's Morgan's a place where NFL teams, use data crunch things or, data hubs for different things in the sports realm. I think that's a really cool and innovative thing to implement. And I think it's awesome for people to know, what's kind of going on in sports in different HBCUs and how, from a player and a specific knowledge that you do have, how it's able to be implemented. So we kind of transition a little bit, not really, but the ideal personality type player, right? If I'm a player at a school right now, they might hear this. They will say, I might want to get into athletic administration. What type of personality or player would lend well, following your post-career blueprint to the position you're at now?
I'd say anybody who wants to work hard. And I always tell the analogy, if you really wanted to shoot 30 minutes or an hour of 3-pointers a day, you would get a college scholarship somewhere, right? It's all based on how much work you want to put into it, right? And so I was somebody in administration that didn't know much about fundraising. I've never fundraised before, right? I ran presidential campaigns and I've done, door to door, like you can call it sales, but I wasn't selling anything. I was trying to get people to participate. But because I wanted to learn as much about it and I was willing to work harder and really gain as much insight as I could, I think that was something that could drive me in a space that was unfamiliar, right? And so I would say just your ability to work harder and understand, okay, I've never seen this coverage, but I do know once I see it, now I can be prepared for it. And
Right.
so really having that understanding, okay, now that I've seen it, now it's up to me whether or not I go get it or not. It's up to nobody else but how much work I want to put into it.
Absolutely. And it's like, it goes back to what you said, even while you were picking your college choice, right? You were going for the education was kind of your lead thing. And I kind of touched on it with Obama staff assistant, the campaign manager, when you're going through that whole situation in college and like taking advantage of those opportunities. Cause for me saying, we were talking about going through the process and becoming an athletic administrator. You're somebody that kind of put these different pieces in place as you were going, right? In college, doing the presidential campaign, understanding the different movements of people, being an agent, moving in that sector, landscape and moving in that sector. And then you get to administration, you're dealing with different ranges of people. It just sounds like the perfect blueprint for you that you fell through, and it was unique to yourself. You said like the trait or something that I can do is work hard. What kind of personality do you think would lend well following your path?
A lot of times, being a nice and respectful person gets overlooked,
Gotcha.
right? And I think that carries you a long way, right? You've heard a lot of times, and there may be some spotlight on folks who really did great things for society that weren't nice people, right? But not a lot of things get talked about in regards to folks just showing respect to folks in the workplace, right? Showing respect to folks that they supervise, and just being a nice person. I think those things carry a long weight, right? Being nice and gracefulness and understanding that people, all people come from different ways of life, different ideologies, and I think that's really a trait that gets built, that you start to understand in a football locker room, right? Is that if somebody's different than me, that doesn't mean that I'm not going to be nice to them or I don't respect them, right? And I think that that's a trait that folks that aren't in a team environment don't necessarily understand. Because they don't understand how to be respectful to folks that they may not like, or somebody who took your position, or somebody who do these things that you may not like, how you have to still respect them. So I think that's a very crucial trait that a lot of people don't talk about.
All right, that's good, because that kind of transitions into my next question. For athletes aspiring to be athletic directors, what can they do to prepare to make that critical transition? I know you said like pretty much having awareness and being kind and nice about how respectful you are. And so for an athlete that wants to kind of be in your position, what can they do walking around the hallways, tactical? Like what can they do to make that critical transition?
I think it's for any sector that you want to do. You're in a good space as a young man or woman to ask questions and not get shot down, right? And so whether it is in finance, why not go and ask the Wells Fargo CEO a question if they're accessible to you, right? And so I think that you need to come prepared, right? It's not just a conversation. Write down 1, 2, or 3 questions that you're going to have that you can have answered, so that you're gaining more information that you can develop, right? And that you may gain more insight. And so I think that a lot of kids don't do that because they're afraid, not understanding that you're in a really time frame where you can be curious and people will not shoot you down. Right? You can really bug people and they'll say, okay, this is an ambitious young man. After you graduate, it starts to become, okay, you may be bothering people, right? And so I think that those 4 or 5 years, 6 years, however long you're there, is a good time for you to take advantage of that curiosity phase that people give you the opportunity for.
Man, that is a diamond of a gem to throw out there, man. Just taking advantage of the opportunity that you're in and not just walking up to somebody, but like Lydell was saying, like be prepared, understanding you're prepared, like your preparedness and what you want to accomplish. Go over and talk to, if you want to be an administrator, go talk to the athletic director and have some questions and ask about it. Like that person will get to know you. You start to build a relationship, like Lydell said. When the career is over and you come back, start asking questions, it does get kind of weird. That's one thing that I always regretted going through as a player, knowing that I wanted to work in football, having the football background and coaches. Sometimes I took that for granted. What Lydell talking about, like whether it's just, I can't even say being respectful, but just going to go talk to a coach or asking questions or whatever case may be to build that relationship, to provide value and just exchange ideas, to put myself in that light as a player. Because I was hurt when I start calling when I'm done and it's like, I'm like, hold up. Hey, I thought we were, you know what I'm saying? But that's great advice. Young administrators out there, listen to what he said, moving up in the ranks, have some answers and be prepared to like provide value. You have a critical view, right? Like, I don't know how good it would be, Lydell, if a player came up to you and told you something, how, you know, the football or basketball, field hockey, or how something may be going right now and their view on it from an athletic administrative standpoint. You create dialogue. That's some pretty powerful stuff right there. So, I mean, thanks for that. That was really good. For young administrators out there, I mean, that's always something, you get into the field. And I know, like, competitive nature with football players, we make that transition. We're in the field. How do you move up? Like, what's some advice that you would give for young administrators out in the field that are looking to raise the ladders?
It happens where people can move up and not be productive, but very rarely, right? And so if you want to move up, you got to just produce, right? And so if you're an academic coordinator, it's about, okay, are you somebody that when the student athletes coming into your room, they know that you're going to develop them? Because if it is, it's just word of mouth, right? What ends up happening is that somebody says, oh, I got a guy over here at Utah Valley that can really raise money. And they say, oh, well, the only reason they know that I could raise money at Utah Valley was because I did it and I produced there, right? If not, I would just still be a name, right? And so it's similar to what we talked about earlier in regards to how coaches get into it. If you're developing a room and if you're producing and you're recruiting and you're producing, you're going to get found, right? It's the same thing in administration. You can work really hard to make connections, and if you don't produce, it will mean nothing.
Take care of your craft is what he's been saying. Prepare, lean on your skills, and produce. I love it. I mean, that's the business of athletics. I know you've accomplished so much at such a young age, man. Just playing in the NFL, master's degree, going to go get your doctorate, raising $400 million in athletic gifts, so many implementing programs at HBCUs, like the whole nine. What's your career end goal?
I will be an athletic director. right? And I say that in that we talked about the doubt before, right? And understanding, okay, how do you learn from the lessons that you know before? I had doubt in regards to whether or not I would be in the NFL, right? And I think that doubt prevented me from reaching my highest level of achievement,
Mhm.
right? And instead of me saying, okay, I will be in the NFL, and when I go to the NFL, I will be all pro, and whenever I'm all pro, I will go to the Hall of Fame, right? Instead of having that confidence and affirmation, there was that doubt. And so for me, I will be an athletic director, right? And my end goal is really just to help young men and women who are going to lead this world way better than our generation did and will lead us to the future, because these old knees are only getting older, and we need our daughters to take care of us. And so really, as much insight as I can into the younger generation and making them great, I know that's where I want to be.
Man, that was great. Thank you so much, Lydell, for joining us here at the Blueprint to Success series. Like you said at the beginning, man, just a quick recap of every kind of what we touched on. You just talked about leaning on the pillars, understanding that as an athlete, man, you have to prepare. You have special skills that you go through the ecosystem with, and that you can develop and understand. Having a plan, information is key. Like Lydell said, going through the recruiting process, he was exposed to basketball, elite basketball at a young age. And then as he continued to move up, he got into football, and he could see that, okay, I need to have a plan and prepare to execute that plan. The same thing, maximizing education in college and going through the transition and becoming senior athletic administrator now. So that was just a very powerful interview, and I just really appreciate all the insight there for the guys out there that maybe want to become an athletic director. Like you said, athletes, take advantage of those times when you're on college campuses. You got a very unique standpoint, very unique access. He's talking about earlier, access to administrators, access to coaches, ask questions, get in their ear, like trade, take the information. You're at a university to get the information. Like Lydell said, going to school for the education and maximizing this whole process, using football as a catalyst to a career that you can bank on. Remember to subscribe to the channel, download the checklist, the Blue Chip Blueprint checklist. Again, thank you, Lydell, for joining us.
Yeah, JK, let me plug one if I can.
Go for it.
Real quick plug, man. I just want to say I love this platform, man. Love what you're doing. I think this will really be the guide for student athletes and folks who want to be elite, and not just in the sport, but be able to take advantage of the college system, both coaches and student athletes. And so congratulations to you on this platform. This is a much needed space, a much needed guide for folks who, like me, did not have much information in this. And so we talk about access. This is giving them access to the back door. And so much respect to LIG and Blue Chip Academy, and all the best in your future.
And thank you so much.